So, the one bad thing about letting you hit the record button is sometimes I would hit the record button early and we'd be chatting and have little fun stories, and then you would look down, you'd be like, oh, we're recording already. and I don't get to do that anymore because I repositioned the desk and the button is on Connor's side.
Yes, now I know how to straighten up.
Yeah. Oh, so it's been quite the past couple of weeks, and when I was down finding research on Lucinda and Lucy, who we did last week, I thought I'd been thinking a lot about this story of Bill Grasmick, and it took me forever to remember his name, and I had written a story about him, and I found the story after much searching, because the Star-Herald does not have good search stuff. You literally type the guy's name in and nothing, it's just like, oh. But I eventually...
Go back to the microfilm.
Yeah.
Start sliding through.
But I had found the story, so I cut and pasted it, saved it in a file. I'm like, I want to get to him in the future. And because all I had was that article that I wrote. Everything else was down at the museum. So when I was down there, getting the information on Lucy and Lucinda, I thought, oh, I'm literally sitting next to the filing cabinets. I'm going to look up Bill. And there's his file. I pulled it out. I didn't have a lot of time that day, so I just took pictures of everything, which ends up being a bit... I need to remember to take my laptop down with me, because he wrote a memoir, and because I took pictures, I had to type everything up that I quote in this episode. If I had scanned in things, you can make it OCR scannable so you can cut and paste stuff, but I had to type everything up. But my main thought was, I'm down here. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get everything photographed from his file while I'm here, and we'll get to it in the future. So it's been like 6 weeks since I got a chance to sit down with everything, because there's more than, again, when I did this article on him, I was limited to how many words I could do. But for this, it doesn't matter. It's my podcast. Yeah, we make it as long as we want. So that's what I did. So sometimes I wrote here, sometimes when you go in the archives, you find a gem you want to share with the world, but man, I feel like I find them all the time.
There's a lot of interesting people out here.
Yeah.
That don't get talked about a whole lot.
Yeah, but there's a little file, and whether it's a one-sheet file or, Bill had a memoir, and then Charlie Fenster interviewed him as well, and we should probably do a story on Charlie, because he was a huge ag guy in this area. I met him like once or twice before he passed away, but ag wasn't my beat. So, it was just in passing when he was volunteering at the museum, because that was my beat. And then the things that I learned about him over the years, I'm like, man, I wish we had interviewed him, because he seems like he was a cool dude. So I went and I just photographed all of that, brought it home, and then spent like the last 4 days going through stuff, figuring out what I wanted to do. And when we started this podcast, I remember writing on the list, that dude I did a story on who wrote a memoir, because I couldn't remember his name.
That dude.
But I didn't want to forget him. And so now, hopefully, I don't want to say I could do a better job than what I did in the paper, but hopefully this will reach more people. It's got more stories than what I was able to do in the Star-Herald, and it's a little bit longer than twice what I wrote in the paper. And I did get a long story in the paper, but anyway, so several years ago, I came across his memoir by accident, and it always stuck with me, because even though he wrote a short little memoir, it's preserved. And then Charlie Fenster interviewed him. And the reason that's important, and I write about it later, Charlie asked him all these ag questions. So he's like, oh yeah, my dad had this farm and we had this many acres and we planted this and we got this many bushels, all the super duper details that ag people love. And, my eyes start to glaze over because I don't even really know how big an acre is.
It's kind of like when you start reading the Farmer's Almanac. It's like,
Yeah. But I would highly suggest anybody want to know more, get a copy of the interview Charlie did, because it's got all that stuff in there, and it's really, it's cool. It's just I don't understand it because I'm not from an ag background.
Sure.
So when you tell me you have 80 acres, to me that seems like a lot, but is that a lot? I have no idea.
It is quite a lot.
Okay. So for one of the neat things I like about living here is how much everybody understands how important history is and preserving it. And the downside of that is it often sits in a filing cabinet and no one knows that it's there or where to find it. I can tell you right now, the last time I was down at Legacy, the back, I call it the back room, but it's in a big, huge room. It's about the size of this room you and I are sitting in, so good reference for you, but not for everybody in the world. It's about the size of this big old room, and it is full of stuff. And every time I used to go down there as a reporter, you're stepping over stuff, trying to be careful not to damage things. Some stuff's organized, some stuff's not. They are really, really organizing there. The last time I went in there, I could walk down every single aisle. There was, so they're doing a real good job of getting everything organized. So if you call and you say, hey, do you have X? Yes, we have it, and it's right here.
Yeah.
So they're making, there's a huge effort to get that all done now. So that when new stuff comes in, you just got to archive the new stuff. And they have tons of volunteers that do that. The staff is not doing that. Well, staff is doing it, but tons of volunteers are doing it.
People who like to do the archive work for fun.
Yeah.
And good for any of you guys that like to do that. That gives me a headache just trying to think. Just trying to think about that.
I don't mind doing it, but I want to get paid.
Right? I want to do it for free.
Yeah. And Legacy does have an archivist, but they have one archivist. And they have a buttload of volunteers, so they're doing a really good job with that. But again, if you don't know it's not there, how do you know to look for it there? And Bill's story to me is one of those. And when I sat and read it, it was one of those days where I got a text from my boss, Irene, are you coming back today? Oh, yeah, I'm just finishing up. And I went for something else, and I'm sitting there reading Bill's memoir, and I'm glad my boss could not see what I was actually doing because I had finished my proper work like 2 hours before. So, and whenever I come across these stories, I feel like that proverbial kid in a candy store. So I'm like, oh my God, like I gotta read this. And then I get super sidetracked. So this is one of those stories. And in order to tell Bill's story, we need to do some backstory on his family and how they got to this area. For that, we have to go all the way back to 1715 to Johannes Grasmuck. And I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It's Grasmueck. And today the Grasmicks are Grasmick. But they left Germany in 1715, and they went to Odessa, Russia to farm. So they're part of those Germans from Russia that left Russia. And Johannes did this because it was a rich farming area, and he wanted to provide for his family better than he was doing in Germany. So they were already farmers. The soil is richer, easier to farm. His family will basically have a better life. So off they go. Johannes was part of those Germans from Russia who mostly originated in west central Germany and moved to the Black Sea area. And there are a lot of descendants of those Germans from Russia in the Platte Valley who have resettled here after leaving Russia, which is another story for another time. We'll have to do the story on the general story on the Germans from Russia.
Well, and around 1715, so I mean, we still have kings, queens, czars, kaisers,
yes,
all that. So,
and we'll get to something with Catherine the Great in a minute. But when I was looking for some of the towns where they were at, my friend who is from Russia, I called him over, and he's like, I go, where is this? And he's like, Irene, that's a German word. What do you mean? Are you sure that was in Russia? And then
they probably all were renamed.
Yeah, and then I explained it to him, and we did a couple of Google searches because one of the names ends with stat, and he's like, that's a German ending, that's not a Russian ending. And I'm like, okay, but they named the town that. And so we did some searching and found the area, and we found some old maps of the area, and they've since, once he saw what it was named in Russian, and we came across a map in Russian, and he's like, oh, and then we just had some fun, and I didn't put any of that in the podcast. It was just, hey dude, how do you pronounce this name, and where the heck is it? Because I can't find it on a map, because one, I'm looking for it on a modern map, and two, it was a German word that was used then, but it's now a Russian town. So,
well, and of course, like I said, after the monarchy fell, during communism, a lot of those towns either got renamed or new towns were built and were given new names.
Yes.
Mostly had Stalin in it, I've noticed, or some version of his name in it. But
So that was a neat little sidetrack that I took doing this, which is partly why it took me so. Remember when I texted you and I said I was almost done, and then I think it was like 5 hours later.
5 hours. Okay, I'm done.
It's because we were looking at maps. So Johannes married Anna Elizabeth at some point in time. That's the only information I got, is they got married. And Johannes died on February 12th, 1731. He was survived by his wife, Anna Elizabeth, and his son, Johann Jacob Grasmick, was born on March 7th, 1729. So I'm thinking they're still using Grasmuck, but I'm pulling from Bill's memoir, and he spelled it this way, so I'm sticking with the modern pronunciation. So Johann was 2 years old when his dad died. Johann, who is now grown up, married Johannetta Elizabeth May on June.
Can't make this up. Yes.
I know, on June 16th, 1752. So he was 27 when he got married. And Johannetta was born on April 28th, 1726, so she was 3 years older than him. I don't really have any information about Johann's early life. This is just taking from Bill's memoir what he remembers, because we're talking 1700s, and he's relaying this information like 2009, 10. So it's just family history, and you don't really have the stories. You're looking at 300 years have passed. So so Johann had 7 children, 3 girls and 4 boys, born between 1753 and 1765. They are detailed in his memoir. By the time I got to this, I was just like, I don't want to tape all their names out and their birth dates, but their names and their birth dates are in there. So if you're a Grasmick and you're looking for family history, it's in his memoir called Legacy. You can get the info. So Johann and Elizabeth lived in Rohrbach, Russia. So this is a case again. Rohrbach is probably German. It's a German name, not a Russian name. But they moved to Balzer to homestead in 1766 along with 90 other families. The migration is estimated to have taken place over the course of a year from June 1766 to June 1767. So for the next 100 years, there isn't much known about the family. They were just living there. Historically, in the early 1860s, there was a 100-year pact signed or agreed to between Catherine the Great, who was leading Russia, and the Germans. And in the early 1860s, that 100-year pact was done. So under that pact, Germans could move to the Volga region in Ukraine and homestead there. They could have their own schools, their own culture, their own churches. They were tax-free, and any man born there was exempt from military service. So they're having a crap time in Germany. Yeah, you can be a farmer, but you really, really struggle. You can move to this area that's richer in soil. You can keep your entire culture. Y'all don't even have to learn Russian. Just do whatever you want. We'll leave you alone for 100 years.
And I believe that's because Catherine the Great was
she was German.
She was German,
yeah,
and married married into the Russian society, but I think married back into Germany. She was German, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that was the whole reason behind that contract.
Yeah. So one of the roadblocks that historians and genealogists find is that not a lot of records were kept, so everything has to be gathered piecemeal. Like there's even now there's stories about my grandma that I know because my grandma told me, but they're not in any books. If you go and look, okay, this was her mom and dad, these were her brothers and sisters, but there's no stories.
Oh yeah, or you had grandparents like mine who were just full of shit. I mean, they would just tell me stories, and it's like that never happened.
Yeah, that's not true. That's not true.
I'd either had to hear it from another family member, or I guess the great one, which many people do, your grandparents give you the old, don't feel too guilty, you have Native American blood in you.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, we have genealogy tests here now, guys. I don't have a single drop of Native American blood in me. So you're lying.
Yeah.
I know you're lying. Nice try.
And on the flip side, I know I do. And I don't want to say I don't care, but I don't care because I consider myself white. It's so minute.
Well, and I guess that's the whole thing, right? It's a guilt factor. Try to ease your guilt, in my opinion. Because if I would be the same way. If I did have any, it would be a minuscule amount. But it's really actually quite funny that I don't have a single any in me whatsoever. Yeah. Like I have more Asian descent in me when you do the little percentages thing.
Oh, really?
Because it'll give you like 2%, 1%, 0.5%, and I have quite a bit on the Asian European side. I think I even have some Middle Eastern in there. But when it comes to North America, zero. Like it could be, almost as in the negative, folks. It's like you are not a part of this country. So grandparents, you love them to death, but they elaborate. They like to spin good stories. They like to make sure that you don't think that their family's the bad guys in any point in time or history, which I also figured out wasn't true with my family.
So are you saying that me with the single grandma out of all the grandparents, because they all died before I came around, but having my grandma actually tell me the truth is rare?
Well, I shouldn't say so, because you never know. I'm not saying that.
But no, I hear your story all the time. That Grandpa told me this, and that wasn't true.
Yeah, that was an absolute lie. Well, and memories fade.
True.
You only remember things from your side, so you could be telling a story in your head for decades, and then before you give it out, it's like, oh, that happened. Well, it never happened, but you told that story in your head thousands of times, so it happened. There was that one time where you were a baby and you did this funny thing, and it's like, did that happen? Well, no, probably not, but in my mind it happened.
Yeah.
and isn't that a good story worth the hearing anyway?
It was fun.
Yeah.
one of the things that I had a few issues with Bill Grasmick, he had said his family's earliest records were from around 1863 when his grandfather, Johannes Grasmick, was born. And oh my God, the family records are difficult because everybody keeps naming everybody the same name. I hate that. I get it why they did it, but Johannes, and then Johann did this, but Johannes did this, and then John did this, and I'm like, wait, is that the same person?
Well, and quite often, at least even to this day in Russia, I know from my friends in Russia that your middle name was your father's first name.
Yes. Yep.
And that could probably be incredibly confusing as well.
Yes. So there were a couple of times when, even in Bill's memoir, that he's talking about Johann, and then he starts talking about John. And as I read along, I'm like, oh, this Johann and John are the same person. Like, and I'm...
Well, like what you did, Billy and William.
Yeah.
Same person.
At least he was the only William, so we're good there. So Johannes married a woman named Christina Bauer, and so German name again.
That sounds familiar, Bauer.
Bauer is very common.
Oh, are they?
Yeah. At least where I come from in New York.
I thought there was a well-known Bauer family here in Scottsbluff.
I think there is.
So I thought there was a Dr. Bauer.
Might have been.
Maybe, I don't know.
So Bill's father had a sister named Marie Christina. So Mary's Christina. His sister's middle name is Christina.
Get original, folks. Come on.
Yeah. So Marie immigrated to the U.S. around 1904 and married a dude named Carl Grasmick, but they don't believe he was related to them at all. But, I don't know. In Germany, was Grasmuck like Smith? I don't know. But
my surname is Baumgartner, and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
And you're not related to, that's Baumgars. There was a Baumgartner's store. And
I'm related to the two brothers that owned electricity companies on either side of South Dakota. I'm related to that because that was my grandpa and his brother.
Oh, that's right, because you all came from South Dakota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not related to Eric Baumgartner, who jumped off of the Red Bull rocket and made the highest leap.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not related to that Baumgartner.
Yeah.
So there's several Baumgartners that have done famous things that I'm not related to at all. There's an Olympian from Africa, I believe, with the last name Baumgartner.
And see,
I'm not related to them at all.
If this was like 1960s, 1970s, you could lie and say you were and get away with it.
Well,
not that you would, but
it's the one bad thing I'd say about the Baumgartners, because at least going back to like World War II in Germany and all that kind of stuff, it's like, well, technically there was a Baumgartner on every side.
There you go.
There's even a book called Baumgartner's Bombay about a Baumgartner of Jewish descent who flee during the war to Bombay. It's a fascinating book. I'm not related to those Baumgartners, not that I know of.
Right.
I'm related to the ones on the U.S. side. Go USA. Because I did have a family member who he was a merchant marine during the war. Didn't do anything like too serious, but was a merchant marine during the war. So yeah.
Yeah. So as far as they know, this one wasn't related to them, thankfully, because then keeping it in the family through marriage. So thankful,
you never know.
Yeah. So in 1804, Bill's father was 10 years old, and his father, Bill's grandfather, died from injury sustained in a construction accident. I really wish he had gone into more detail about that, because 1804, I want to know what kind of construction. Was he helping build a railroad? Was he helping build a house? What kind? That's just the reporter in me that wants all the details.
Yeah.
At the time, the family lived in Lowy, Russia. And this was where I pulled my Russian friend in, because it's Lauwe. He's like, Irene, that's not a Russian word. That's German. And it took us a while to figure out where it was at. And it was a little bit north and a little bit to the east of the Black Sea. and it lies on the east side of the Volga River.
That's kind of like saying it's on the east side of the Nile there, Irene.
Yeah, I know.
That's a big river.
I know. But it's on the east side, not the west side.
It's on the east side, though.
His paternal grandmother, Christina, remarried a man named Fox. So Johannes dies, Christina remarries a man named Fox. And she gave birth to a son, Gottlieb, at age 50. So she got remarried. And
hey, Gottlieb's a pretty interesting name.
Yeah. And it's the only one I came across in this story. So I'm like, yep, pretty sure.
They're probably sick of Christina.
Yeah, they're sick of Christina and Johann and Johannes and Johannetta. So this Mr. Fox had quite a bit of money, and he paid for Johannes to go to college for 2 years in Katrina-Stadt, which was quite a ways from Laos. So Katrina-Stadt is probably the German version of like Ekaterinaburg, or it's German, but the Katrina is the German version for Catherine, so I think they're honoring her.
Yeah, could have been named after her.
And the Stadt is definitely a German ending. So they're living in Russia, and they're naming their towns German names.
And because Catherine the Great was German, so I'm sure when she came in, that was it was a time of peace between those two, because they were. I don't think they had yet gone to war. They were going to go to war.
Yeah, that's usually why those marriages happened, was to prevent war.
Yeah.
So Johannes was well educated in math, chemistry, and he could speak German and Russian. He also apparently taught Russian in the German school back in Laos at some point in time. This was a little bit confusing to me because there's too many Johanneses going on in this story, but I'm pretty sure this was all the same dude. So Johannes, or John, was now 19 years old, and I write Johannes or John because in Bill's memoir he shifts to John, and he was now 19, and he was going to be drafted into the military. This is because that 100-year pact was over, and he could be subjected to being drafted in the military. So his mom says, yeah, dude, don't be drafted. Go to America. Your sister's already in America. Go to America. Mm-hmm. So his sister lived in Sugar City, Colorado, and he really didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave his mom behind, because at this point in time, you leave your family behind, you're probably never going to see them again. Yeah. It's not like today. My husband's from England, and
you go back on holiday whenever you want.
Yeah. We're not rich enough to just go back on a whim, but we can go, and we have been several times. But at this point in time in life, if you go, you'll be lucky if you have letters.
Yeah.
That's it. You're done. Your relationship with your mom is done, and he's 19.
Especially in Colorado, so you're back in the middle of the USA.
Yeah.
Post isn't great. We had Post by then. We had the Pony Express, but it wasn't the greatest, most reliable.
But I'm thinking to get a letter to your mom in the Volga region
of Russia during the time of the revolution, because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
1906. So we're about
we're not quite there yet,
but you're about
still
heading into the revolutionary times. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely at this time upheaval in Russia. People are rioting. People are mad. I believe Lenin had just, either he was already exiled or he was just about to get exiled, because he was exiled before he came back. He was exiled for several years before he came back to Russia. But lots of crazy things were happening in 1906 in Russia.
My guess is a letter a year.
Yeah.
Because you figure it probably takes 5 or 6 months to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Then your mom would have to write a letter back, and then 5 or 6 months to get to you. So
if you had the money to do it.
Yeah, that's the other thing,
sending
too.
Sending a letter that far away was not cheap.
Yeah.
That was pretty expensive.
So he's 19. He doesn't want to leave his mom. But his mom is like, I don't want you to go to war, because if you get drafted in the military, you might die. And she didn't want that to happen. So
And
as a
this-
mom, she's thinking, I'd rather my kid be alive in America than dead.
And this would have been what war? I'm trying to think. The ones where they go against the Ottoman Empire?
Yeah, I know what you
The
mean.
Crimea War. The Crimea
Was
War,
it
right?
Crimea?
I
Okay.
think it was the Crimea War.
Yeah, there's a good chance he's going to die if he goes
Yeah.
and gets drafted. So he agreed to go. And in his memoir, Bill recounts that he couldn't find any proof of the work that his dad did, but that his dad told him he worked as a cook on riverboats in the Volga to save the funds needed to travel. So Bill tried to do the research to find out what jobs his dad did, but there's no like physical paper trail. He just had to go by, my dad said he did this, that, and the other thing. So he did at least try to do his due diligence and find documentation, but it's just not there. Again, your turn of the 20th century, it's that kind of documentation just doesn't remain unless you're a king or queen, and they don't work anyway.
And, well, it just didn't happen. And honestly, it's kind of weird because when Russia got really good at categorizing things is when the Romanov Empire fell.
Yeah.
And communists took over, and then actually quite a few things got standardized and categorized and filed, and it was amazing how much was archived during that time versus the time before.
And
the
and
communists
that's
took
and
over.
that's why even now you're still finding documentation from World War II with the Nazis. And
you're still finding all sorts
there's-
of things that are pulling up.
yeah, and there's still stuff from World War II with the Russians because it sat behind the Iron Curtain. And we've really only had, 25 years where foreigners have been able to go in and look at that stuff and have it be released. So there,
And it gets declassified over time, just like everything in America gets declassified over time. It doesn't get declassified right away. I still don't think, like the Capitol riots, for instance, I don't think that has been declassified yet.
not everything.
Not
Yeah,
everything.
it'll be a while
It
before
took
that
a while.
happens.
I thought it took almost, how long did it take between 9/11? I thought it took almost 5-7 years, I think.
Yeah,
After
yeah.
9/11 happened, for them
And
to
there's-
have the official report come out.
Yeah, and then there's still some things that trickle out from time to time because there's a automatic mandatory, you can't release this for X years.
Yeah. But then after X years, you have to release
Yes,
it. So,
yeah. And then by then
I mean,
it gets released, and then how many people report on it? Because 9/11 isn't big news anymore. You know what I mean?
No. It gets back to, right of information historians. And a lot of countries follow this. The Vatican does this with their popes.
Yeah.
We still don't have Pope John Paul's. I don't think we've been given access to his archives yet. I think there's a set amount of time. I don't know if it's 10, 20 years. It's basically enough time for his scandals to get either swept under the rug or for them not to be a big deal because of time.
Right.
and then you can go back, because I think the one that we have access to now is a couple of popes back still.
Yeah.
And we're not allowed. We definitely don't. I don't think we have John Paul's yet.
No, not everything, at least.
Yeah, I
we
think
have a
his
little bit
official
trickle
archives.
out here and there, but not everything. So he agrees to go, and Bill recounts that his dad told him he worked on ships in the Caspian, Black, Aegean, and Mediterranean seas as he made his way toward Liverpool, England. And he purchased a ticket to America on the F. Missler ship out of Bremen, Germany. He thought that his dad worked his way over rather than working, saving the money, because the timeline matches up that he probably worked as a cook on this ship to get here and then worked as a cook on this ship to get there.
Yeah.
And you have experience as a cook. I mean, how easy do you think that would have been to just pick up on the next ship and say, hey, I'll cook while you're going to your next destination.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been very easy. I know from being a cook back in culinary school, yeah, it definitely wouldn't have been easy to go from ship to ship. You're always getting kind of battered around anyway as a cook, but to get to the next job and still put up with everything, yeah, it would have been horrible.
That's kind of what I thought would have happened with him. But regardless, he did work as a cook and made his way toward England, and then somehow he bought a ticket to America on a ship out of Bremen, Germany. So he's making his way to Liverpool, and then ends up having to somehow get a ship out of Bremen, which I'm not quite sure about. And an interesting side note, I believe Bill wrote it, but it's in his file. It's a picture of the ticket, or a ticket from F. Missler. And apparently a lot of people start researching their family history, and they have these tickets that say F. Missler. So everybody's looking for the SS Missler. But Missler was a shipping line agent.
Oh, so it's like Blue Star.
Yeah, so it's Frederick Missler.
Yeah.
And he worked with the North German Lloyd line. So that's probably where the confusion comes in. And I'm making assumptions, and Bill has passed on, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he actually did leave out of Bremen, because his goal was leaving out of Liverpool. Yeah, it could have been Missler, who was based in Bremen, but he worked with the North German line, and it very well could have left from Liverpool, because that was a major leaving off point to the U.S. was from Liverpool. And again, Bill was told this by his dad, so it's already once removed from the person who was, so that's just my thought, that's probably what happened there with the confusion with Bremen or Liverpool, and that it wasn't on the SS Missler, because Missler was just a dude that worked with a shipping company.
Sure.
So yeah, like the White Star Line.
Yeah.
So in April 1906, at age 19 years, 9 months, he arrived in Philadelphia. So we're not sure exactly when he left from Russia, but we know he was 19. So you're looking, let's say he turned 19 and it was, a couple days later when he left. You're looking at 9 months max that it took, but I'm thinking it was probably like, at least 5-6 months, because you got to get out of Russia, and then you're going through all these seas. Well, okay, so the Black Sea's not too far. It was probably a few days.
Yeah.
To that, and then, it takes months to get there. It's not like today, where I literally flew from JFK in New York to Tanzania, which is on the east side of Africa, and it was a 31-hour flight. So in a day and a half to get to Tanzania, which is halfway across the world. And he's pretty much kind of traveling miles-wise, roughly the same.
Right,
yeah. And it's going to take months at this point in time. So Bill wrote in his memoir, upon arrival in Philadelphia, he was befriended by a man who worked in the immigration office who spoke German, and when he asked Dad where he was going, and Dad answered, to Sugar City, Colorado, this man said it was 2,000 miles from Philadelphia. Dad said he told him he felt he was almost there, as he had already traveled almost 7,000 miles. Dad said he had only 50 cents left, and he was prepared to work to earn enough for a train ticket to Sugar City. This man invited Dad to his home, gave him a change of clothes, a bath, and a good home-cooked meal. But that wasn't all. He offered to loan Dad enough money for the train ticket to pay it back when he could, with only a handshake for security. Can you imagine this happening to an absolute stranger today? No, Bill, I can't. No one's going to give you a plane ticket or a train ticket that's hundreds of dollars with a handshake and say, yeah, pay me back when you can.
But they got there. So it makes you wonder, was that an exaggeration? Or, I mean, did someone really just do that, like out of the kindness of their hearts, just
give them some money? And there are people that are like that, but also Bill passed on, and there's no way to ask, dude, did your dad pay the money back?
Right? Did that man give it to you, or did you just take him around the alleyway? Take what you wanted.
Or was your dad, yeah, I'll give you the money back, and then just never did? You know, I would have asked a follow-up question, but this was Bill's memoir. He sat down, he wrote this later on in life.
Tell us the story how you tell it. Yeah.
Dad didn't tell us how he paid the money back. Okay, I want to know that story even more now. So the journey took 8 days. So from Philly to Sugar City took 8 days by train. When he arrived, and so let me just give you some context there. It was about 2,000 miles.
Yeah.
Took 8 days by train. It is just under 2,000 miles from here to my mom's house in New York. I drive 14 hours, sleep in a hotel, drive 14 hours, give my mom a kiss and a hug, and go to sleep, and then do whatever. And to fly on a plane from Scottsbluff to Denver to Newark, and then drive an hour and a half home in New York, it's about 12 to 14 hours. When you figure in layovers and
unless
stuff.
you're extremely lucky to kind of do a boom, boom, boom thing.
Yeah. So I'm looking at, about half a day to fly there. And he took a train and took 9 days. So.
Fun fact, though, I've learned.
Or 8 days.
Trains in your neck of the woods go slower than they used to. They actually used to go a lot faster than they do nowadays. I didn't know that. So even the ones from here coming out this way probably went faster than they do. And it's kind of weird because I would have thought because of the technology, they would have in fact gone slower. But no, it's because like safety regulations and everything have made trains make them go slower. Back then, they just didn't care.
Yeah, they didn't care. Hey, train's coming, get out of the way or get run over. Yeah.
It's just like go full throttle. Don't care if you go through a town, just keep going.
Yep. You're not stopping to pick up anybody, keep going.
Keep going.
Yep. Yeah. So when he arrives in Sugar City, he saw a partially built factory, piles of steel, and lots of tents. Immigrants who worked at the factory in Rocky Ford were living in the tents as they helped to build the factory in Sugar City. So they're not even commuting from the next town over. They're just like, we're from that town, but we're here living in tents while we build the town. It's kind of like the place up in North Dakota when they started the fracking with the oil up there. Everybody was living in tents until crap got built.
Yep.
And my husband has a former student. He lived out of his car for a year and came back and bought a brand new like F-250 pickup truck and paid cash for it. Yeah. He got paid gobs of money, and he just he had his check put in his account back here in Gearing, and he worked up there for a year, and he was like, yeah, that's all I can do. And he had
It's hard work.
Yeah.
It's hard work to go do that kind of stuff.
And he not only paid cash for that pickup truck, he had his 4 years of college paid for. And to me, that was well worth it. And as a man, he can do that. I'm sorry, but as a woman, I would not be safe sleeping in my car for a year. So I would not be able to do something like that.
Well, and it's up in the fracking fields, north or south, but I mean North Dakota especially, it is not a very habitable place.
No,
it is flat. It is cold. Your spring and summer last a whole 2.5 months if you're lucky. And then the rest of the time it's just freezing.
Yeah.
So, go have fun fracking oil out there.
Yeah.
It's like You'll make your money, but you'll make your money unless what did happen is the bust, and now you're not going to make any money going
Yeah,
out
you
there.
needed to be up there the first, 4 or 5 years that they were doing it to make that serious money.
Yep.
And that kid was just like, nope, that's what I'm going to do. And he did. He made a buttload of money. And he said he pretty much worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. And he goes, but I knew I was only doing it for a year. Yep. And I'm like, yeah, and you made a buttload of money, and you've got a big step up in life.
Yep.
And the fact that you started college a year later, so to speak, isn't going to mean anything when you're done with college. That 1 year means nothing. And you know, his family was going to help him pay for college, I think. And you know, they didn't have a lot of money, so he would have been saddled with a lot of student loans.
Yep.
And now he didn't have to worry about that. So there's not really much built when he gets there. He's able to locate his sister, who had since married and was living in a house. So that was a big deal. Everybody else is living in tents because stuff ain't built yet. But his sister was living in one of the houses that had been built. And he stayed with her until he could get settled. And he worked at the sugar factory, first helping to get it built, and then as a chemist in a lab, and then he also took up farming. You know, we've already gone through this, generations of farmers already. He's just doing it here rather than Germany or in the Volga region in Russia. Bill's father worked hard and met a lady named Elizabeth in church, who he thought was pretty. That was one thing Bill remembered, was his dad thought this lady was pretty that he saw in church. He didn't talk about if they had a courtship. Who knows? They could have, they couldn't have. Bill just didn't write about it. But he eventually asked for her hand in marriage from her grandparents because she was living with her grandparents. So to me, I also want to know, why is she living with grandma and grandpa? I know that happened at that point in time, but at any point in time, if you're 15 today and you say you're living with grandma and grandpa, I know there's many reasons why. I'm still going to ask that follow-up question, what happened to your parents? And I want to know here, but Bill just didn't write about it. They got married on April 1st, 1907, and they had 8 kids. The final 2, Bill and his brother, were born in Gearing, but they're still down in Sugar City at this point in time. And in case you're thinking they got rid of all the Johanneses because Bill and his brother Donald, they didn't. But thankfully, Bill was born later enough that we're not going to be confused anymore.
No more J names.
Yeah, there was one, but he was like the first boy. So to finish up Bill's dad's stories, his parents decided to move from Sugar City to Gearing in 1918 after a severe drought that year and a crap load of hail affected the farm. And you and I live in hail country. That's one of the things I love about my house. It has a garage. I don't have to worry about that anymore for the most part.
Well, but just last year we had about east of Minutair, there's tons of farms that got destroyed by a hailstorm.
Yeah.
And the hail was so horrendous that morning when I drove out there, you couldn't even see the fields. It was just covered and it looked like snow. And this was in July or June. You know, it was in the middle of the summer. So it was, And when that happens, the crops are done. You can't do anything to salvage it. You can't replant by that time because you're not going to get it.
It's too late, yeah.
Yep, you have to have, I know corn farmers are going to kill me out on quoting this, but I think it's anywhere from, depending on which type of corn you grow, I thought you needed at least 16 to 18 weeks between planting it.
Yeah, I haven't planted corn in a long time, but I know the season is very long.
I thought it was 16 to 18 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and there's faster corn now that we have that wasn't around during this time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because 16 weeks is 4 months, and I remember late March we used to plant ours in New York. Now, granted, we have different soil, so we have different planting times, but I remember planting toward the end, like maybe it was mid-spring, end of March would be early spring.
Yeah.
We planted, and it wasn't until the late summer. So you got April, May, June, July. Yeah, it was like August something. So yeah, that sounds about right.
You need quite a bit of time. So if that time's interrupted, corn or sugar beets are no better. You know, if those fields get flooded, or if they get too much moisture, the beets aren't going to grow right. They're going to get fungi infection, and once they get a fungal infection, they're useless. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Yeah. So
for those who don't know, sugar around here, I think I went through this last time.
That's
it's
okay.
a sugar cane, it's a sugar beet, so it's like a potato. It grows in the ground. It doesn't grow up like grass or like corn. It doesn't grow like sugar cane. So it grows different, but all your leaves are still on top to get all the nutrients down to the sugar beet. So you still have to have, sunlight, no hail. Hail will destroy it. So yeah.
Yeah. I felt bad when I had read that.
But very, very common.
Yes.
Super common around to this day. You can still have farmers lose a farm.
Yep.
If you had 2 or 3 solid years of these horrendous hailstorms that destroy your crop, you're going to lose the farm.
You're done.
And it still happens to this day.
Yep. Also today, you'd probably take I-80 to Kimball and head north for about 45 minutes to Gearing if you're going to come from Colorado. Mm-hmm. In 1918, you had to take the train, which went around to Bridgeport and then to Scottsbluff. And Bill wrote in his memoir that that's the way his parents got here, was they went to Bridgeport and then changed trains, came to Scottsbluff. And then when they arrived here, they met Jacob Brown, who was Bill's mother's uncle, who took them to Gearing on a horse and wagon. So I kind of chuckled at that because in order for me to fly to New York, I fly Scottsbluff to Denver to Newark, which is in Jersey, and then my nephew picks me up and we drive 90 minutes back home to New York. Yeah. If he didn't pick me up, I would have to take a train over to Hoboken and then get on a different train, and it's another 90 minutes back home. So this just kind of made me smile because you're sort of at your destination, but not. Like, according to United Airlines, I made it to my destination in Newark, but my home's still a little ways away.
Still, yeah.
So they all...
I was so thankful that Phoenix has 2 airports. They have the Phoenix National Airport, but then they have the Mesa Airport, and that's where, when we fly and not drive into Phoenix, we always go to Mesa because that's where my grandmother and my mother-in-law live, is in Apache, so they're a lot closer from Mesa. If we went to the International, we'd be same thing. We'd have to an hour and a half through Phoenix, through the city of Phoenix, just to get to our destination.
And before COVID, I would fly from Denver to Newburgh, and Newburgh is 20 minutes from my hometown. And there were several flights a day, so I could take the early flight here, land in Denver, catch a 9 a.m. flight, and New York's 2 hours ahead of me, and be at my mom's house by 2:30 in the afternoon. The only option I have now gets me into Newark around 5:30. There is a flight that will get me at 7:30 if I happen to miss that flight. But if I land at 5:30, by the time I get out of the airport, it's 6. So the earliest I'm getting to my nephew's house is 7:30 p.m., and I'm usually at the airport at 7 a.m.
I hate airports. I hate
so
airports so much.
It used to be a lot easier to do this trip before COVID because anybody would come pick me up. And now the only person who's willing to come get me is my nephew, because no one else drives in big city traffic.
Yeah, that's becoming a problem with my family.
Yeah.
I had to take a trip to Denver, and I was the only one brave enough to go go down the highway and get to downtown Denver.
And I still don't have an issue with big city driving. That's not a big deal to me.
Yeah.
But
you just have to drive like you live there. That's why I tell people.
Yeah. And my family's like that. They've always been like that. No matter where I land, even when I landed in Newburgh, it's a 4-lane highway, I guess 2 lanes, because 4 total.
Yeah.
But my mom would hug me at the airport in Newburgh and hand me her keys. So I've just flown halfway across the country. Here's some keys. Drive me home.
Drive me home.
And it's not even that much traffic, and she hates it. That always,
poor thing.
Yeah. But I got to see my family, and they enjoy having me there. They just don't do cities. And worst case scenario, I think I would just rent a car down in Newark and drive up. But my nephew always comes to get me, which is nice because I can just relax. And he doesn't mind the driving. So they go on a horse and wagon, and get this. The Browns were a family of 10 or 11. Bill's family at the time were a family of 8. Oof. They all stayed in the Browns' house for 3 or 4 days before moving into a 2-room house in Gearing. So I don't know how big the Browns' house was, but you've now got like 18 people shoved in a house. My house is fairly big, but if 18 people were in this house, I would probably kill somebody.
Right. It's like the scene off of Home Alone, the McAllisters. Right in the first scene, you just see everybody just running all over the freaking place.
Yes. So they moved into a 2-room house in Gearing. How do you fit 8 people in this house? Careful. 8 people in a 2-room house.
Carefully.
Oh my God. There are 3 people that live in my house, and there are days I just want to tell the other 2, get out, come back in a few hours, just go. But usually what happens is I either come down here to my office, or I just get my car keys and I'm like, I need to go somewhere for a while. Yeah. But, they didn't have this option then.
Even growing up, because there was 5 of us, my mom, my dad, my 2 sisters, and me, we lived in a trailer for the beginning part of my life, for the most part.
Same.
It was always just like, sometimes it just get a little too cramped. But then there's other times me and my sisters would share rooms just because we felt too lonely. So sometimes there'd just be an empty spare room for no reason at all. So we were a weird family. So I guess maybe you could probably fit 8 people in that trailer. Another 3 wouldn't matter. And
maybe it's, that's kind of how things were sometimes. Like if you think back to the original Willy Wonka movie, right. Mom and Dad and Grandma and Grandpa and the kids, and they're all sharing beds. So there's like 6 people in a bed, and I don't like to share. So even to this point, that on our bed I have my own blankets. I usually end up stealing the sheet. So Paul just doesn't even bother with the sheet anymore, but we all have our own blankets because we fight over it all the time. So we're like, screw this, we're just getting blankets.
We never did the shared blanket thing, even when we go to hotels.
Yeah.
I'll usually have to have a separate set sent up of blankets or something, because like, here you go, here's yours, here's mine. Oh,
see, I always try to order a room that has 2 beds. Because then we just pull the sheets off the other bed.
Or I just get my own bed.
There you go. I have done that before.
Sometimes.
Yes, I have done that before. I believe when we were in Hong Kong. I don't know. He was snoring and I just couldn't take it, and I was tired and crabby, and I just got up and moved away. And he's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "You're too loud."
There's every once in a while it's like, oh, I love you to death, but I just want my own bed.
Yes.
Where I can just sprawl out and not worried about kicking anybody.
Happens to all of us. Yeah. So Bill has now arrived in Gearing, and Bill's dad has arrived in Gearing. He's not born yet. And we will get to him being born and his life in the North Platte Valley on our next episode. So for now, I'm Irene.
And I'm Connor.
And this is Storytelling on the Plains.